What is up, guys? Welcome back to another edition of Mind Renovation Nation. I am your host, Nathan Bush, and today on our live cast, we are going to be talking about collecting rent. So today's live cast is all about collecting rent and collecting rent with love. I think that that's very important, is that we are doing this as a process of collecting rent with love and being all of the things, right? All of the things appropriate in life and doing the right thing. So collecting rent is an essential part of property management, but it's not always a straightforward process, guys. So let's take some notes today, get out your notepad, and let's work through collecting rent with love. So since it's not a straightforward process, but it is a process, and let's make sure that we understand that at times it requires a delicate balance between compassion and requiring property managers to embody various virtues such as faith, love, forgiveness, adherence to rules, overcoming fear, and following the golden rule. So those are all the types of things that we're going to be talking about today, how to have those things in your collections process, how to ensure those things in your collection process. And we're going to talk about the Red Maples collections process today to make sure that we have got a thorough understanding of what to do to specifically collect rent. So let's talk a little bit about faith in the process and how faith is so important to collecting rent. As a property manager, we have to have faith in our system. Our system is what we have to have the faith in for collecting rent. The faith allows us to approach each situation with confidence, knowing that we have got the necessary tools to handle any challenges that may arise. And adherence is, and if you adhere to these procedures that you set out, what's going to happen is you'll create consistency, predictability, and that serves both the investor, ourselves, and the tenant. So it'll serve the investor, our management organization also, but more importantly, it serves the tenant when you are consistent. And fostering a sense of stability and trust in our professional relationships is ultimately, I think, the most impactful and the most important. So what is the Red Maples process? We are going to talk about love and compassion. We are going to talk about forgiveness and flexibility. We are going to talk about following the rules and upholding standards. And we are going to talk about overcoming fear and embracing the golden rule. But let's talk about the process first. What is a good collections process that will help you to be able to better collect rent from your tenants? And here it is. So the Red Maples collection process, first and foremost, you've got to have the ability to take online payments. It is so critical in collecting rent that you have the ability to take online payments. And we can take payments two different ways, ACH and credit card. And the tenants need to have that ability. They can't be paying through Cash App. They can't be paying through Facebook cash system. They've got to be able to pay their rent through an online system. And so ACH or debit card is extremely important. The next part of our collections process that's so important that we have access to is a program we have now called Pay Near Me. And Pay Near Me allows the tenant to be able to take their cash down to the local Walmart or down to the local Target and be able to put that cash into their account, their rental account, and pay their bill off and get a receipt for it. So that's the Pay Near Me program. And then lastly, we do still accept the ability to receive payment with money order and via cashier's check. We do take personal checks from time to time, but it's on a very few occasions. We've actually gotten to the point where 99.9% of all of our tenants pay online anyways. And so that's where you need to get in your business. So that's the first part of our collections process, is that the tenants have got to be able to pay their rent and pay their rent in a way that they're used to paying their rent. Now, that's so important to have faith in those systems that you're actually going to receive the money when you're supposed to receive the money. Now, there have been times where the tenant says that they have paid via credit card and the credit card just didn't go through. I can see clearly on their portal whether the payment has posted or not. So if the payment hasn't posted, I have faith that the system is telling me accurate information. The tenant may have tried to pay, but ultimately couldn't get the money through. One of the other things that we do in our process or our system is we have a grace period for tenants. So they can pay their rent before the 1st all the way through the 5th of the month and not be considered late. But as of the 1st through the 5th, that's your grace period. On the 6th, every single account that hasn't paid, no matter the situation, is consistently every month going to receive a 10% late fee against their account. We charge a flat 10% late fee, not this dollar per day stuff, not the 25 bucks. It's one time flat rate, 10% of the rent. That is so important also. The tenants can easily measure and know exactly what their late fee is going to be if they pay late. Now, the 6th, on the 6th of the month, when they receive their late fee, after the late fee is posted, we're also going to send out balance notifications via email and direct mail to the tenant to let them know, if we don't have an email on file, to let them know that their rent is past due now and they have a balance with a late fee. So after those notices go out, we'll start receiving phone calls on those notices, and we'll start making phone calls the 7th through the 9th of the month. That's when we'll make all of our phone calls, send out all of our text messages. We'll continue to follow up via email with people who owe balances. And the 7th through the 9th is a heavy collection period for us in order to make sure that we can get in communication with tenants who are not paying. The 10th through the 15th now. This is where we're going to assign occupancy checks. This is also where we're going to issue our 5-day pay and quits. And so on the 10th through the 15th, we're going to be notifying the tenants come the 10th of the month, hey, we're going to file eviction on the account if you don't pay your balances as you're supposed to. And so I find that to be so critical that we are consistent in our 10th through our 15th approach. And then on the 15th, any balances that are over $500, we are going to file eviction on you. So by having consistency in those collection processes and having faith in that process, what's so interesting is the tenants know what's going to happen. They know when we're going to take action. They know when their deadlines are. And by setting up that consistency, it provides a very, very direct way for that tenant to have an understanding of what is coming next. And of course, throughout the month, we're going to follow up on any payment arrangements that are made with tenants. We're going to send texts, emails, and if we have a suspicion that the tenant's not there, we can't get a hold of them, we're going to knock doors. So we also, as part of our process, on the 25th of each month, are going to send out some type of small balance notifications to make sure that we collect all of the outstanding balances that are due with the next month's rent. And so we have found that these are just some good collection practices to have in place, good collection processes to have in place, and we have faith that those systems work and they work like they're supposed to. For instance, if the tenant didn't owe a balance, let's say that there was some type of struggle with with them paying and going through the credit card processor, and we identify that on the 7th of the month, we're not filing eviction on them without them knowing what's going on. And that's where love and compassion for tenants comes in. Love and compassion entails is essential in rent collection because it reminds us that our tenants are human beings with unique circumstances and needs. And by approaching the situation with empathy, we can have a better understanding of the issues that may contribute to the late or missed payments. Also, understanding this allows us to better work with the tenant and find mutual beneficial situations that'll help them stay on track, guys, with their rent, and also make sure that their financial success of the property is imminent is the word that I'm looking for. So we want to make sure that when we're collecting rent, we do that with love and understanding. And part of that love and understanding is the consistency in the process and to actually reach out to the tenant. I think so many times what happens is landlords think when they're trying to collect their rent that their job is to somehow make the tenant feel less than. To feel down, to beat that tenant up, to add fuel to the pity or the fire that tenant is challenges that tenant is going through. And we take the opposite approach. We take the approach that we have consistent systems, policies, and practices. And our job is to help the tenant identify what is going to happen next and help them offset what would likely happen if they decide not to pay their rent. So we want to do that with compassion. We also want to make sure that there are times where there is appropriate to issue forgiveness and flexibility. So there's definitely going to be times where a tenant makes a mistake. It's a one-time thing. They face some type of unexpected challenges that impact their ability to pay their rent on time. And so as property managers, I think it's important to have a practice of forgiveness and be willing to work with the tenants to find reasonable solutions. But that doesn't mean that we have forgiveness in every part of our process. We have forgiveness maybe in one element of our process that will allow that tenant, if some mistake happens, to not face unavoidable consequences that they weren't aware of or didn't understand. And so that's our entire goal, is to communicate what is coming next, why it's coming next, and to make sure we do it with compassion to offer our guidance and assistance to see what we can do. Maybe as part of that process, when we're demonstrating flexibility and understanding, this provides a little bit of strength in the relationship with the tenant and promotes a positive rental experience for all parties. So Nathan, you just said to us, and I know what you're thinking, Nathan, you just said to us that you are firm on your policies and procedures. And then you also at the same time talk about forgiveness. And I would be remiss if I didn't take a second to talk about the importance of seeking out the truth in every situation. Making sure you get verifiable, documentable information as to why you're doing something specifically. So you don't just randomly waive late fees. You don't just randomly skip an eviction when our eviction processes are, require a balance to be filed on over $500. You don't just randomly call and text sometimes and don't call and text other months. You got to be consistent in your policies and procedures, which makes the forgiveness that much more impactful when you're able and you have the capability to offer that forgiveness in the right situation. So with that said, our organization also believes in following the rules. We're rule followers. So we have a lease agreement that says what is supposed to happen with that tenant and explains it and outlines those requirements with that tenant. It also explains what we're going to do in the relationship. So because our organization is rule followers and we do uphold standards, we also understand that while compassion and flexibility are important as property managers, we also got to uphold the rules that are set. I think that so many times too, property managers, they think to themselves, okay, I'm the one that set this policy, so I have the ability to be flexible on this policy. And I think that is the absolute, I think that's an enabler's anthem, honestly. If I'm telling you the truth, I would say that if you think that it's okay to say to yourself, I'm the one that set this policy, so I'm the one that can change this policy, is the demise of properties. I'll give a perfect example. We were taking on a property one time. There was multiple properties that had balances over $1,000 that were outstanding. And I thought to myself, how could somebody allow this to happen? And I'll tell you exactly how they allowed it to happen. They allowed it to happen because they were being flexible on their own policies and procedures. They were being flexible on their own policies and procedures instead of upholding those policies and procedures and setting consistency for those tenants. And now here's what I feel bad about. I feel bad that those tenants are going to be evicted from a property and they didn't have the consistency and the strength of a management company that was willing to put the rules in place and follow those rules to help that tenant and that tenant get on pace. Because here's the truth in life, and this is the principle that we follow. We know that when you break the rules every single time, there's pain and consequences that come. Even if that pain is delayed, there's still pain behind breaking the rules. And so following the rules is so important, not just for you as an organization, not just for an investor, but the rules are so important to the tenant. That consistency helps shape that tenant's decisions. And those decisions ultimately have long-term consequences. I don't look at filing an eviction lightly. When an eviction has to be filed, and we do file quick on people, when an eviction has to be filed, that is a consequence of people making poor choices in their finances. And so I think it's also important that if the tenant is willing to have conversations with the tenant about what they can do in order to avoid these terrible situations coming, like an eviction on their credit or on their record. All right. So we've talked about a number of things. We've talked about having faith in your processes and your procedures. We talked about love and compassion for tenants. We've talked about forgiveness and flexibility. We talked about following the rules and upholding your standards. And I even laid out for you early on in this live cast the Red Maples collections, policies, and procedures as they stand in place today, and how they have helped us to be consistent and collect rent consistently from tenants when rent is due. I also laid out some principles and some policies and told you some truth. Now, here's the last thing that I'd like to talk about. And I think that I saved the most important for last: overcoming fear and embracing the golden rule. What do I mean by that? Well, the process of rent collection can be daunting. And I know that, particularly when you're in difficult situations, it can be difficult to have compassion for the person who's being disrespectful to you on the other side of the conversation. So, to be successful as a property manager, you've got to overcome the fear of having the conversation with the courage and conviction to follow the process and rules. By embracing the golden rule and treating others how you'd want to be treated in a similar circumstance, we can navigate these challenges that we have as property managers with grace and professionalism. So, I think it's extremely important that you have the ability as a property manager to overcome your fear of making that phone call, but don't have pride in collecting that rent. I think that when you're having the conversation with the tenant on the other end of the phone, the conversation is extremely important to talk about with the tenant the important things that are coming up and the consequences of not following through and paying their rent on time. I would hate to be in a situation as a tenant and end up in eviction court and didn't know it was coming. And so these are all things that you can do. Incorporate the virtues of faith, love, forgiveness, adherence to the rule, overcoming those fears, and following the golden rule in your rent collection process. And this will help you become a more compassionate landlord. I think that compassion has a firmness to it, and it also has a kindness to it. And if you can have the courage to be firm, in the kindness to seek the truth and understand in every situation with your tenant and get verifiable information before making any deliverance of grace to the tenant, you can then strike the right balance between empathy and enforcement. So, as property managers, we can foster a positive relationship with our tenants and ensure financial success for the properties. It just has to do with being consistent and upholding our rules. All right, guys, this has been another episode of Mind Renovation Nation Livecast. Do me a favor, if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. We've upgraded the connection for the live stream here, and you will be notified when we go live on YouTube. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you follow me on Facebook, make sure you like, comment in the comment section. And if you want to know more information, please check out red-maples.com, red-maples.com, and that is information about property management. You can head over to the website, and if you need a property manager and you're feeling overwhelmed and a bit frustrated about your property, look, let us help you. Have a conversation with our organization. I just had a appointment this past week that I was talking with an owner of a specific property, and they decided that they weren't going to use our services for whatever reason in management, but they took some of the ideas, concepts, and tools, and they're going to implement those things in their properties right away in order to help them become more profitable. So a conversation with us, if you are considering a property manager and you need some help, might help to reduce some of the stress and give you just the solution that you need. Thanks, guys. Have a good afternoon.